Hello and welcome to another demonstration. I'm going to be using Saunders Waterford and the SAA watercolour pans. This is a premiere, and if you're in the premiere, I will be in the chat so I can answer any questions or just say hi. So, celebrating the festive season, I'm going to be creating this beautiful door with an absolutely fabulous colourful wreath. I have to think about where I start for the demonstration because I need to allow areas to dry before I move on, but you may work very differently. Now I haven't got the exact colour for this. I think it's a very, very light yellow door. So I did find that this yellow ochre works, but I need to make it quite pale. And don't forget, watercolour does dry a lot lighter. So, and I'm also remembering these bits around the door are not solid, whereas they are at the bottom. It's much easier to put on a light wash and build up from there than it is to put it on strongly straight away. Key ingredient for watercolour, water. I know that sounds quite a flippant statement, but you'll be surprised. I've seen a lot of new people, new to the medium, and they like to really load their brush with colour, which is fine, but they often then find that they can't get the techniques that they've seen. And you will learn how much or how little you do need. But with anything, it's practice and discovering. There you go, door done. That was really quite easy. So while that's drying, I'm going to go into the top. Now I haven't got a grey, but it doesn't mean I don't use one, because I like to mix my own, and that's some burnt sienna and a blue. Now I've got a couple of blues. That looks like a phthalo blue, so it might make a bit of a green grey. Ultramarine and burnt sienna makes a nice grey, but I do find it gives you so many colour options. Rather than just grey, you get blue grey, you get brown grey. Might be, let me try a different blue. You'll notice I don't actually, that's the blue I'm looking for, clean my palette very often. And I will use a lot of the colours that I have already mixed on. That's better. So that was a phthalo blue. This is the ultramarine blue. And it's a little less green. And that's going to give me a lovely warm grey I'm looking for. Right, very light again. Putting a wash on, but too strong. Let's go back in. Let's lighten it. Now this bit has been bugging me. I have drawn the line, but I think it's not straight, so I'm going to have to straighten that up a bit. Okay. And now with a clean brush, I can soften and blend. The nice thing about using watercolour is often the medium does the job for you, and that's really satisfying when you get a medium that does half the job for you. Okay, that's much straighter. Well, it's still wet. I'm going to put a darker line on top. Hopefully that will bleed and run into the wetted area, because it's not flat. Right. Go in with the burnt sienna, which is actually the perfect colour for these tiles on the roof. Again, light. And it doesn't matter if I have some of the grey colour bleed into. There will be areas I don't want colour mixing, but here it doesn't matter if some of that grey bleeds into the tiles at the moment. This is just a very light wash. Okay. And you'll notice that's not flat and even. Again, it's doing half the job for me. It's already given me some depth. Wet in wet. I think it's right at the end that it will all come together. But I like to put colour on and then see what happens, because watercolour will dry very differently to when you put it on. It will dry much lighter and will often keep reacting with the paper long after you've put it on. So you don't actually see the final finish until it's dry. And you can aid that by using a hairdryer, but I think just waiting and watching it do its own thing, watching paint dry, is actually much more useful. Just picking up. I have to be careful on here because it is quite light and white. I don't want to put too much colour in. Okay, that's a good start. Right, hopefully that's dried. So I used that yellow ochre, and then I was trying to mix a darker colour and I couldn't find a colour which would mix it to the shade I was looking for until I mixed the ochre and the burnt sienna, and that gives me that little bit of value to work around these shaded areas. The thing about the original is that the light's quite flat. It's obviously no strong light, which means you sometimes have to add your own touches of light just to add a little bit more interest. Just darken that. You can see by just very light washes, especially on this colour, and you can build it up. So a bit of that burnt sienna, a bit of that ochre, plenty of water. Let's go down again. Not strong enough, let's go down again. So it is darker at the top, because that is under the eaves. And it comes down to like I say, I don't want to lose that colour, the first colour I created, because that's just perfect. Now normally I like really strong colour, but for this I'm just, because the star of this piece is going to be the wreath in the middle, which has masses of colour. I want to see if I can create a much more soft effect in the door. Right, blend that out. Across there again. Still not got the darker tones, that is going to come a little later. But you can see there, that's had 2 layers, slightly different tones, but that's building up. I'm going to go into the door windows, and again they're not flat, it's that bobbly glass. So put some colour on with a dry brush, move it. I'm just stippling it as well, because it doesn't matter if some areas miss the paper and I have white gaps, because that's actually helping to create that bobbly glass effect. Same here. Trying to keep my lines as straight as possible, but it's not always possible. As long as something isn't overly off, I think get away with slightly straight lines. A bit darker in there. Take that up. All I'm doing is using that pigment that's already on the surface just to pull up colour. Right. Go again while it's still wet, much stronger, because the light is coming from here usually. So the darkest parts are going to be at the bottom of this glass. Again, stippling, because I don't want it a flat colour. I don't think there's a lot of light coming through this window at the moment. It's the ones at the top. Straighten that up. So this is a round brush, and what you can do is you can flatten it. You can see there I've flattened it slightly, and that's what I'm using to get some straighter lines. Also, if you turn your water brush, you will be able to keep a point right in there as well. I've got to remember that bit. I could go and get a tiny brush, and I might do that at the end if I've got some lines that really bug me. It is quite difficult to, oops, do a straight line. Right, put that down. I still need much stronger colour at the bottom. Damp brush, move that. And in the middle there. This side. So the light is over here, so this side possibly is going to be catching a little bit more of that warm light, bit of the yellow ochre. I need to clear my brush because I had blue on it, and blue and yellow make green. While I'm doing that, I'll do this as well. Just add that light. Let's soften it over. Just catching, but not a huge amount. So let's take some of this dark up just to blend in. Take that up. It's a little wider, that one, so don't want to take it from the side of the frame. I will take it from the middle. Okay, it's much more even. Okay, onto the top windows. Again with that burnt sienna and blue. Clean brush, damp it off and move. So using a Saunders Waterford, which is a cotton paper, is going to work really nicely for the technique I'm going to be using for the brickwork. Next one, which is going to have a little less of the darker grey because it's got a lot more light coming through. Damp that off, blend it in. Make the window a window. point to my brush. These brushes are the imitation sable, which imitate the qualities of a sable brush, but are synthetic. Pretty much a go-to brush for a lot of my watercolour painting. It still does need a little bit of dark at the bottom. Clean my brush, twist it on the page, the tissue, because that's going to get me back a point. Twist it in the palette, and I've got a nice point. You have to be careful, because sometimes trying to straighten up, you actually make it a little bit more wonky, and then you keep going. Dab, dab. And I want across there. Okay, that's the door. I can go back in and add any areas that I want to darken, but for now that's worked well. And in the meantime, the door's been drying. I can now go in a little bit stronger. Might add a bit of that grey, which is why I don't mix stuff, take stuff off the palette usually, because I can always That's nice, I like that colour. Might use that. Right, so let's redefine this bottom panel. Oops. So that was going off a little bit on a piece. So we don't want it to be crooked, we want it straight. A clean brush, clean water, and back in. And straighten. Okay. Right, just while I'm darkening. And I tend not to breathe when you're doing that, holding your breath. It's easy to go up for me, just to go down. And I'm going to go around here because they have beading around the glass. strengthen this a little bit more. Like I say, I think the door's been photographed and it's quite flat. So I need to just push those panels back a little bit. And again at the top, push that back a little bit more. It's really difficult when you've got a really light door because I don't want to go too heavy with shadow and lose the colour of the door by just making the shadow. But you do need to give it some different tonal values. Okay, right, I'm going to use some of that grey and do my sign. I think it's a beautiful slate. Piece of slate with the name of the cottage on it. Let that dry again. I don't think it's straight. And just add a bit of clean brush, blend it in. Again, this has just got a curve on it. Run out of paint. Try again. Blend that in. What I'm doing is making the white of the door stand out. This isn't going to be, it's a red brick, so it is going to be red brick, but I just want to push the white frame, show it's a white frame. But I will again also still need to put that into shade, but I'll do that later. So, right, next thing I'm going to do these fabulous bricks. Around there. So wet, just wetting the paper, and this is why I chose Saunders, because of this wet in wet technique. I often use Bockingford. Bockingford for me is often a preferred surface just for the techniques I use. But for this very wet in wet technique, I do know that the Saunders will work really nicely. It allows the paint to move and blend on the surface a little bit differently to the cellulose Bockingford. I can't paint around the lamp. I will with colour, but with water it doesn't matter. And again, it doesn't matter if colour goes into it because the lamp's actually black, so I will be able to paint over it. Plenty of water. Because there's quite a lot of sharp edges, I'm having to think about where I'm applying the paint. Because I want some areas to have that beautiful diffused wet in wet look, but others I want to keep that sharpness. Fabulous. And this is easy because this burnt sienna is a perfect colour. And I don't have to be nice and neat about it. I'll go over the bell, I can bring that back. This is brick, and brick has so many different tonal values in it. I can just drop the colour on. So this bit of the paper is wet, but the white areas above it are dry, so it's not bleeding into. Look at that, look at the beautiful diffused colour. So no bleeding into the other colours if I'm careful, because they're still dry. I'm going to just go around that as carefully as I can. Like I say, it's fabulous when you've got a medium that does the job for you. Okay, need to let that dry. So let me just bring the colour where it needs to be. Okay. So while that's drying, I can just move on to the areas inside the door. Okay, let that dry. So let's have a look. I can work out from the door. Let's create a black bloom and burnt sienna. A bit more blue. A bit more brown. I want this a strong pigmented rather than a wet paint. So there's a lot more pigment than there is water, because I want an opaque black. Okay, use the tip. Might actually make life a little easier and go to a smaller brush. The reason I don't go in with a small brush straight away is because you end up fiddling. But for sometimes, like these details, I do need a smaller brush. Makes life a little bit easier. But you could see how much detail you could get from the larger brush. I think I just need darkening still a little bit more. The reason why it could do with darkening a little bit more is it means it pushes the lightness of the door forward. Again, stippling, just to suggest that bobbly opaque glass. Well, it's not opaque, as it's transparent, but not clear transparent like you get in some glasses. It's diffused, that's the word I'm looking for. A diffused kind of look. Again, now I've moved that, bobble that in. And inside there. Right, now for a little bit of a tricky bit, it's the door handle, which is lime. How far down does it go? It actually goes down further, so. And it has a kind of fleur-de-lis on top. Load my brush. Fleur-de-lis that goes. My brush is too wet. Okay, that's better. Better. Much more pigment, I've got more control. And it has a panel. The door handle comes up. Okay, right, I'll show you. Great way to do brickwork. I'll probably need the bigger brush. I'll start with the bigger brush, but this cottage has quite small brick. And I don't want to do too strong every single brick. But I want to suggest and they have longer ones and then small ones. I need to just change my position because I'm getting quite tight. So it's better. Raw sienna, burnt sienna is a bit dirty. Some are going to be more defined than others. And I am actually consciously thinking about how bricks are laid. I got a bit confused at the bottom there, but you can see there, I know they're laid across each other. Again, I can just pick up the colour from the palette. I can fix those ones at the bottom because I've got the swing of how I want them to look. The longer brick goes on top. Like I say, I don't want every single brick painted. More of a suggestion. Put a bit of colour in there. The difficulty will be going on that side because they need to run across. Now I did notice that across here there's actually a line which I think's quite interesting to suggest. Let's put the bricks along that line and then the other ones above it. Getting into the rhythm on this side. So let's start with a small one. Fairly close. And as it's drying, it looks a lot better. I would never make a brick layer, but you get the idea of where bricks are. A bit muddy. Because they're all quite the same colour, which See, I quite like how those have dried, and I can neaten a little bit and work on bringing the shapes back. If I wanted to, maybe I don't. Maybe I can keep them as they are. I'm just painting a suggestion that this is a bricked building rather than a different kind of rendering. You can get a flat brush which might help create a sharper edge to the bricks. I couldn't find mine, so I went with the round. Nearly done. Let's get these, because we don't want to watch a whole building being built. A little bit stronger over here. Again, let's mix it up with a bit of colour. And what I'm going to also do is because these look quite strong at the moment, I'm going to wash them out, just so there's not so many brick shapes. I'm going to let that dry, then I can do a little bit of taking away some of that quite harshness of the brick. Right, let's go into here and darken. I think I need a little bit more. It's better, because the darker your darks, the lighter your lights. And that needs to come also into here. Use that as a glaze. You can still see some of the colours and the bricks underneath, but it has darkened. A bit too green. So what colour? Have a blue. Kind of a blue-grey. I like that. Okay, that's nice. And I'm also now carefully going to bring it into the door, because that was quite light. It is shaded by this porch, and it also does have a, it's not flat, so I need to just add the edging.
Mind your head.
Okay. You can see how that shadow I've taken right across, because it is, the porch is over the door. Okay, cool. And with some of this glazing, I think I might possibly blend out some of these bricks because they are a little harsh. Again here, down here. This edge needs to be quite clean, but the bricks can be blended, and I need some black. Let me try another way to make black, just to show you, and that's the purple and green. So a black or grey is made from primary colours, which are red, yellow, blue, and it would depend on the red and the yellow and the blue you've got to what grey you get. But purple's made from red and blue, and green is made from blue and yellow. So those colours have the primaries in, and it's just a case of mixing these, and you can get a purpley grey, which again is nice for shadows. So actually this has a black and that comes down into the grey path. Oh, let's go across. I can bring that back. Yes, it comes up to here as well, so I need to edge. Again, on this side. Now, what's difficult is I would normally turn my paper around. No, but let's see what I can do. Nope, so more colour. Purple, green. A bit more green. A bit more blue. Should do. Again, I'm going to wash that out so it's not as harsh. That was a bit more purple, but it doesn't matter. Take that through. I can, once this is dry, I can just come back and straighten any lines. So the mat. What's difficult is all of this area is very black. I'm just trying to distinguish between all the different blacks. And the risk is you go too strong. Okay, so that doorstop is sitting on the I think it's a slightly raised area. This Just suggest that a little stronger, neaten it up. Okay, and it comes out like that there. Just in. It's quite dark under here. Try not to make the areas too flat. Very clean brush. Just going to use my really tiny brush, which I've been saving because I want to straighten this out. I let that dry. Let's get black for the doorstop, and then I'm going to go on to the wreath, and that gives me time for everything to dry, and I can work out any other areas which may need just to work on. So clean brush. Just so it's not so flat. Okay. Let that dry, see how that works. Right, this is the fun bit. Onto the baubles. And it looks like a lot of work, but actually you can really get away with just putting colour blocks in. I am doing little circles, and I'm going to just keep moving around. I'm going to use the colours in the original because they're quite nice. A bit more gold there. Put another one there. Now it goes onto the orange, which luckily I have in my palette. Okay, and then a orangey red. I think now starts to go into a purpley red, which is actually, I'm using the alizarin. You have big and small, so you can, like I say, no one's actually seeing the original. I'm going to take that through here. Let's go on to this colour. I'm not worrying about the shading yet, or the light. That is going to come at the end. Let's go into the purple, which I have a pre-mixed purple. this round. And I'm going to use the brightest blue, which will be this one, I think. Maybe I'll change my blue. I'll go to a, that's better. It's a phthalo blue, it's a tropical phthalo blue. That blue. Purple as well. And we're coming round to green now. Let's try a light green. Brush too wet. The darker green just for a little bit of interest. I need to let that dry before I work onto it. So just start to add some bits of detail. Need to strengthen that. Because it's a slate, it's solid, it's not fuzzy around the edges. Line across. What I'm trying to avoid is outlining things. It's better. And well, I've got some of this shadow. Go under here a bit more. Notice how things have dropped back. May need to, especially watercolour, keep building on your tonal values. It depends how dark you want to get. Right. Use some of this just to it's a bit strong, so dump off your brush. What I'm trying to avoid is being too precise. It's all a suggestion. If I had a lot of time, I might spend time with every detail, but it's not always what I'm looking for. Dry brush. lamp. So this is pick up any of these dark colours I've got. Palette. So I'm just putting the dark areas on first. Let's put some light in. I might go tiny brush just for detail to make it easier for myself. I don't always find a tiny brush as easy to use. But it does give me a chance to get details in. Need a little bit of it's got dark and fuzzy. I can fix that in a minute. Okay, fixed it. And I can go back in. It's because I went to a small brush, that's my problem, right, medium brush. And still think this needs to go a little darker. I think that's worked okay. Hopefully that's dry now, I'm not sure. Probably. Using a white gel pen, so I can put the doesn't have to be cottage. I don't think it's dry, which is why that's not fully coming on. I can leave that a minute. Right, a bit of, I'm going to use purple. I just want a bit of definition around. Like I say, I don't always like a small brush because you can't paint loads as easy. Just making a suggestion of shapes. That's too dark, so. Because it will be 3D, it's not flat. And this is when I was going to use this just to add a little bit of light across the tops of these shiny baubles. See if it's dry now. No. Never mind, I'll let that dry and fix my lamp, and then I'm done. I know there's a bell on this side, but I might leave it out, so let's just fix the shape of this lamp. What's my darkest? Colour. Right. They're going for there. Much easier with a smaller brush. A little bit flat here. So. And then I'm okay, I think I'm going to leave that. Apart from one thing I can see, something that I was going to do. Straighten that up. And then I am going to leave it. Okay, done. There you go. A festive bauble on a cottage door, and I hope you enjoyed that, and join me again soon for another demonstration.